This is not my first version of this narrative. I've written it, deleted it, rewritten it, deleted it, and started from scratch a goodly number of times. My drafts all had one commonality. They belched vitriol like smoke from a forest fire. Each iteration contained more bilious indictments of the MX than the previous. Before writing this one, I went back to the photos I took with the MX, and I hope the entire tone of this voiceover changes for it. Looking at the photos the MX returned, they are some of the most accurately metered I've ever taken. And I didn't give the MX any kind of testing cakewalk. Shade and bright spots, changing light, harsh brightness, excessive contrast. I threw at the MX all of the toughest situations I could put it in. All of the images came back generally well. I slapped non-system lenses on the front, including the Samyang 10mm and an ancient 58mm f2.4 Takumar and M37 mount. It took them both, did its job properly, and broke no sweats. My MX was abused like an unloved stepchild. The foam in most of it is gone. The mirror bumper has disintegrated and left only a metal beam for the mirror to hit. The shutter button feels like I'm pressing against a mountain until BAM! With a sudden jolt it gives and the shutter actuates. And I forgot to mention that I had to break the lens it came with off of the mount with a ball-peen hammer and vice grip pliers. I'm not kidding about that. The old lens had corroded to the lens mount. Salt and water had, apparently, corroded the lens to the MX, had made the lens's mount and the MX's mount effectively one piece. After I used a metal file on the mount to remove the raised and corroded areas, it still mounts lenses properly, and they focus at infinity. So is this camera well made? Yeah, it's probably the most resilient Pentax body ever produced. And for all of that abuse, my taking the lens off the front of it and whatever happened to it before I got it, my MX takes stunning photos. I mean, seriously, look at how well it captured the light in some of these images that are playing as I speak. This camera has a simply magnificent meter, and it worked in every one of the nasty situations I threw at it. So I decided to give it the nastiest test I can throw at a camera. I have this motion picture film, Kodak 2383. It's a color print film that I think is used as the stock for creating the movies that you see in a movie theater. I shoot and develop it primarily in Rodinal, and in order to get a proper exposure, I shoot it at ISO 1.6. That is 6 stops slower than 100 ISO. That's as far from 100 ISO as 100 ISO is from 6400 ISO, for comparison. Now, using 2383 requires that I compensate the settings so only a full manual camera can use the film. And I have to compensate a lot because no camera ever made has a light meter that reaches ISO 1.6. And the MX only reaches 25, which still means I have to compensate at least 4 stops. Most of the cameras that I've tried have problems with the 2383 test. The film has an inertia point so far from shutter opening and relatively close to shutter closing, and that means that if the shutter closes too soon, let's say after 0.3 seconds instead of 1/2 of a second for instance, the film will be underexposed significantly. The 2383 test is a measure of how accurately the camera's shutter operates against the proper exposure reading. I ran two 36 exposure rolls through my MX, and in no case did it underexpose the film because the shutter timing was off. Likewise, it didn't overexpose it either, though admittedly that's exceedingly hard to do. That level of shutter timing accuracy from a camera that was as poorly treated as the one I bought is simply incredible to me. Where the MX falls apart for me is the layout and the ergonomics. It feels like Pentax's response to the Olympus OM1 was to take their existing design and compress it. Olympus made a successful small design by revisioning the camera layout. Pentax did not, and for this, the MX and entire M series suffers. The MX is, for me, simply a little bit too small. And I say that as a sincere adorer of my Olympus OM2N. Ultimately, though, the MX is very possibly the most loved Pentax body. The reactions I had universally from people learning I was filming the MX video finally was excitement nearing jubilation. My reaction was always akin to, "Oh, well, you aren't going to like my voiceover." And when I said that, it was true. But not anymore, however, as you can tell if you've made it this far. As I said to a few of you, I returned to the camera after letting it sit and not looking at the photos I had taken with it for a bit. The camera and results were significantly more pleasing to me when I returned to them. Is the MX my favorite Pentax? It's not in the top 10. Do I fault anyone for loving it? No, not for an instant. The MX is a magnificently engineered camera and could very easily be the only body a person owns and, for that, leave the owner never feeling as though they had missed out on anything. So do I recommend the MX? Heartily and without reservation. This is a stunningly well-made camera, and it simply will not disappoint.